explore. So to explore this, let's start with the Devas. These, people will call them gods, but it's almost better to think of them as like highly evolved beings who control cosmic forces. So you have Indra that commands storms and lightnings, Agni that controls fire, and Vayu that controls wind. And they're not all powerful gods like in a lot of, Western religions. They have limits, and they can be born, they can die, and sort of be reborn, although they live incredibly long times, and they can even lose their jobs if they become too obsessed with power. And then we have the Asuras. Now, this usually translates to demons, but the word doesn't really capture what they're actually about. All right, they have powers to oppose the Devas, right? They represent chaos and selfishness instead of, order and, charity. They're not purely evil, okay? Many are powerful and they're smart. Sometimes they can be even heroic. And then next you have the Nagas. Now, this is a snake being who lives underground, and there's a bunch of them. And they're not just regular snakes. They have entire civilizations and cities and craftsmanship, supernatural societies, and, all sorts of stuff, right? The Mahabharata, this is the, one of the greatest like Hindu epics. It is just an ancient text that is really important to Hinduism, next to the Ramayana. And it literally translates to, the great Bharat. It's literally like the story of India and this sort of epic battle between these two sort of clans. Now, in this epic, it describes these snakes as master builders and metalworkers who can create weapons and structures that go beyond human capabilities. So these snakes can also change into human form and sometimes even marry humans that sort of create like half-blood, half human, half snake children. And then other cool beings include the Yakshas. Now, this is like a nature spirit who guards treasures. And then you have the Espadas. These are the heavenly dancers that travel in between worlds. And then you have the Gandharvas. This is like cosmic musicians whose songs can actually affect how creation works. Now, what's interesting in these stories is how, it's like the level of technology, okay? And so these beings don't just have spiritual powers. They also have vehicles and weapons and magical objects that often symbolize divine power and cosmic function. So the Devas travel in golden chariots that can reach any destination immediately. The Nagas, these snakes, have magical jewels called mani that provide light and power and can even grant wishes in certain cases. And, at the time, this is described as, often metaphorical, but by modern day, some people suggest that this could even sound like advanced technology, a ship that can travel anywhere in the universe. Now, one of the big questions is, should we understand these beings as real, actual, interdimensional, or are they, potentially alien entities? And are they symbols that represent, psychological states or spiritual states? Now, Hindu tradition itself will offer different answers. Some schools treat them as real beings living in actual worlds. They are as real and living in the same reality that we're living in. Others see them as symbols of cosmic forces or aspects of consciousness that are, a little less tangible. Now, many embrace both ideas sort of simultaneously, suggesting that reality might work in different ways that we don't actually comprehend or understand. Now, if these beings are real, that is way more interesting, right? Because if they're real, existing in a similar reality to the one we're in, could they have visited Earth? And would we even recognize them if we saw them? So there are few things in Hindu text that will grab people's attention, specifically Westerners that, didn't really grow up with this, like these flying vehicles. These are known as vimanas. Now, these are literally like, a jet or like a helicopter, and it's like a spaceship. It's like, that's really the only thing we can compare it to. But these aren't like simple chariots, pulled through horses, through the sky. They are described as these extraordinary flying palaces or chariots with these magical features. So the Ramayana, one of the oldest Hindu epics, the one that I mentioned before, tells a story from a time way back in the day, an age that was considered ancient even when the epic was written, and it describes the most famous vimana. This is Ravana's Pushpaka. This was a golden palace-sized aircraft, basically. I don't want to use these words specifically, but this is basically what it is. It is a giant aircraft that can move anywhere in the sky or even through space at insane speed. It had windows, rooms, gardens inside, and after defeating Ravana, Rama used this same vimana, this same craft, to fly back to his kingdom, covering massive distances in just hours. Now, these descriptions show that the epic isn't just telling this, heroic sort of, mystical story. If it exists in some type of reality, which some Hindus believe, it could also describe some type of technology. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because you might need a little bit of help, all right? As we know, our society is very sexual, right? It is in everything. We are constantly being marinated in sexual garbage, memes, music videos, Instagram, you're just scrolling and bang, there it is. And then that leads you down a little rabbit hole. You pop into the hub. Yeah, you pop into the hub, and it might be sucking the life out of you and dudes everywhere. Yes, killing your motivation, your relationships, your happiness from just, gooning all the time. And that's why I want to tell you about something really important called Relay. Relay is the first app that actually helps you quit porn for good. It doesn't just tell you like, oh, do better. It give you like little affirmations every day. It actually gives you tools that work, real accountability and actual encouragement and support to help you succeed. It's not about guilt or moralizing or telling you you're a bad person. It's about helping you grow to be the best person you can be. So if you're tired of feeling stuck, this is your sign to do something about it. So download Relay, start your 7-day free trial with the code GAGNON, and start building some real freedom. There are thousands of guys that are already doing this and getting their lives back through Relay, and you can too. So seriously, stop gooning. Stop being a gooner, all right? At least for like a couple of weeks, right? Maybe a month, right? Just do your best, okay? We're all in this journey together trying to be better men. So if you're interested, go to joinrelay.app/camp and become the person that you know you can be. Now let's get back to the show. Now, the Mahabharata, written roughly 400 BC to 400 AD, continues on this theme. It mentions many other vimanas, from small one-person sort of crafts to these massive flying cities that could hold entire armies. So Arjuna, one of the epic's heroes from the Bhagavad Gita, describes a vimana from his father Indra that could turn invisible and change shape and travel not just across our skies, but between different worlds. Now, again, to someone that doesn't understand sort of the divine nature of, a lot of these stories, to me, it's like, sounds a little bit like a UFO, a little bit, right? Now, these vehicles don't, just speed up rapidly. They can also hover in place, and they can, also travel vast distances without really needing to land. Some are described as making thunderous sounds, while others are moving silently. Some could travel in space, others underwater. Again, my UFO people are like, ding, ding, ding. Now, this brings up an interesting question. Were these vimanas actual, ancient machines that were described from a time far beyond us, some type of ancient technology, or is it just symbolic? Is it just representing a spiritual power, or, the ability of highly trained yogis that can send their consciousness over a great distance? Now, again, this happens in the Bible, right? We talk about Elisha's chariot, right, that ascends him into heaven, and we read it and we're like, wow, it's amazing. Is it possible that's a UFO? Who knows, right? Now, some modern interpreters suggest another possibility. Vimanas weren't machines in the way that we think of them today, right? Instead, they were a bridge between our mind and matter, this physical reality. They were said to be controlled through mantras, which is like a sacred sound, really. And then yantras, which is a sacred symbol, and then tantra, which is a focused use of consciousness. So in other words, only someone with the right spiritual training and meditative practice could actually fly them or utilize this bridge. So from this viewpoint, vimanas were more than just vehicles. They were a blend of the mind that is basically connecting to the spirit and some type of like spiritual technology that could basically show a worldview where consciousness itself is a force that can shape the reality that we see, which I think, aligns with a lot of Hindu philosophy. So could these ancient accounts of consciousness power vehicles be hinting at a part of reality that modern science doesn't fully know? Well, Hindu epics and the Puranas, which are, other ancient texts that are very valuable to Hindus, are packed with a lot of stories of direct contact between humans and beings from other worlds. And these aren't like brief, mysterious encounters. They are detailed stories of long-term relationships and exchanges of knowledge. So, for example, take Arjuna. This is a human prince with divine ancestry, obviously in the Bhagavad Gita. He travels to Indraloka. This is the realm of his father Indra, the god of thunder and lightning, and he uses a vimana. Now, this isn't described as a dream or like a near-death experience. It is presented as a physical journey to an actual place. And while there, Arjuna trains with heavenly weapons and masters and joins in divine celebration, and even has a romance with Urvashi, a heavenly Aspara. Now, an Aspara is basically one of these different beings that we talked about earlier. Now, the story is told straightforward, as if he's just visiting another country, right? He goes into his little spaceship, goes to this spiritual land of his father, but is an actual place, and interacts with the people there. Now, what's interesting is how casual the tone is. There's no sense that Arjuna is experiencing something crazy or supernatural. He's just simply going to his father's country, right? Like how we would go to, Mexico or Canada. Like, yeah, he just went over to where Indra was. Now, the text gives details about climate, which is always perfect. The architecture is golden and crystal. The social structure, it's, organized in levels, but it's fair for everyone. And even the food is like divine and it's satiating and there's no waste. And then there's the Narada. This is a divine sage who moves freely between the worlds. He's like a cosmic liaison or like a interdimensional diplomat or something. Like he's talking with the snake kings on the ground and he's attending meetings in heaven and like he's carrying information between these realms. And in Vishnu Purana, an ancient Hindu text, it describes him as traveling through all the worlds, watching everyone and reporting to Vishnu about how well Dharma is being followed in each realm. And then there are Vishnu's avatars, which we've talked about before in other episodes, but these are basically divine forms that appear in different worlds and in different time periods of Vishnu. Now, many people will know about Rama and Krishna on Earth. The Puranas will describe avatars appearing in other worlds too. So the Matsya, this is the fish avatar, supposedly appearing in cosmic waters that exist between the universe. And then you have Kurma, this is the turtle avatar that is held in Mount Mandara during the churning of this cosmic ocean. And this is, according to some Hindus, an event that happened in dimensions beyond regular physical reality. So, perhaps one of the most confusing stories, for me at least, is the Vanaras in the Ramayana, one of the epics I mentioned before. And these Vanaras are these monkey-like beings who become Rama's allies and form an army to battle Ravana and actually rescue Sita. Now, traditional interpretations see them as like animals that have human intelligence and devotion, and their descriptions are interesting, right? Like they're speaking, they're thinking, they organize just like human beings, they have technology, and some, like Hanuman, displays abilities that seem to go beyond normal physical limits, right? Like they can fly, they can change size, they can travel between worlds. Now, some modern thinkers wonder if these stories might record encounters with some type of non-human intelligence or something to that effect. Is this possible that this isn't just a metaphor or some type of, rhetorical device to describe the divine, but is it possible this was a being who seemed different to ancient humans, but actually had this advanced capability? Now, Hanuman's ability to leap across, massive distances and size changing and, moving between worlds and all that stuff, to some, they interpret as potentially a description of advanced technology. Now, where does that leave us? Again, I don't want to suggest that these powerful divine beings are, not that, and that they're just actually aliens or something like that. But to a Western reader, some of these things do appear to have, some overlap with a lot of the discussion around UFOs. Now, behind a lot of these stories of cosmic journeys and otherworldly beings, there's actually really fascinating philosophy that I don't want to overlook, right? This is a way of thinking about the biggest questions that humans have ever asked, right? Like, what is reality? Why are we here? Where are we going? What is consciousness? Like, where do we actually fit into this massive universe? So, the Upanishads, which contain some of the most philosophical ideas in Hinduism, will say something radical about this. Consciousness itself is the foundation of everything. Not just the kind of consciousness that comes from like the human brain, but like the deeper universal consciousness that existed before anything existed. And in this view, stars, galaxies, atoms, even beings from other worlds are all different expressions of this one consciousness. So if that's true, then the universe isn't just sort of like this dead machine that's losing energy every day. It is alive and aware at every level. Other worlds then aren't just a possibility. They're almost guaranteed because consciousness naturally creates endless forms and dimensions. So the real question is, not like, oh, does life exist out there? But it's rather, what kinds of consciousness might exist out there as an expression of this pure consciousness that underlines the entire universe? It's kind of crazy, but this is, again, how it's written in, many of these ancient texts.